Because I hesitated to sign the loan papers, my son Porter slammed his fist on the kitchen table, making my coffee spill. Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you? I need that money now. You're just sitting on it while I'm drowning. In debt! His eyes, so much like his father's, were cold with a fury I'd never seen directed at me before. In that moment, I realized the son I'd raised for 47 years saw me as nothing more than a walking retirement account. I dabbed at the coffee with a napkin, my hands shaking slightly. The loan application sat there between us, demanding my signature and the deed to my home as collateral. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Porter had arrived unannounced that morning, all smiles and warm hugs, carrying the cinnamon rolls I loved from that bakery across town. Now I understood why. It's not that simple, Porter, I said, keeping my voice level. This is all I have. Your father and I spent 40 years building this nest egg. Porter ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so reminiscent of Tom it made my heart ache. Tom had been gone 3 years now, and sometimes I still reached for him in the night. Mom, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. The business is right on the edge of something huge. This contract with Westlake could change everything. But I need capital right now. I glanced around my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught. Porter to make pancakes standing on a stool where I'd bandaged scraped knees and celebrated birthdays. The morning sun streamed through the windows I'd insisted on when Tom and I had built this place, because I'd wanted light, always more light. How much trouble are you really in? I asked quietly. Something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Impatience? It was gone before I could name it. I told you it's not trouble. It's opportunity. His voice softened as he pulled his chair closer to mine. Look, the housing market is going crazy right now. Your place is worth at least double what you and Dad paid for it. All I'm asking is that you leverage that equity. You're not even using it. Not using it? Porter, I live here. He waved his hand dismissively. You know what I mean. The money's just sitting there, doing nothing. The words stung more than they should have. Was that how he saw me too? Just sitting, here, doing nothing? At 68, was I nothing more than an obstacle to his plans? What about the investors you mentioned last month? The ones who were so excited about your expansion plans? Porter's jaw tightened. They're still in, just hit a temporary cash flow issue. The familiar, uneasy feeling I'd been having about Porter's business ventures intensified. Over the past year, each success story he'd shared seemed to be followed by an urgent need for more capital. First, it was the second mortgage on his house, then Angie's inheritance from her grandmother. Now my retirement savings. Why don't you let me look over the business plan again? I suggested. Maybe I can help you find another solution. There isn't time for that. The facade cracked. God, Mom, why can't you just trust me for once? Dad would have understood. He knew how business works. I flinched. Tom had always been Porter's hero, the successful contractor who built something from nothing. But what Porter conveniently forgot was how cautious Tom had been, how he'd grown his business brick by brick, never extending beyond what he could afford to lose. Your father never took risks with our security, I said firmly. Porter stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Fine, I'll figure it out myself. I always do. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. I just thought family was supposed to help family. The words were calculated to wound, and they hit their mark. I'd always prided myself on being there for my children. When Porter's first business had failed in his 20s, Tom and I had paid off his debts. When he'd gone through that awful divorce from his first wife, I'd watched the kids for months while he pulled his life back together. When Leah, my daughter, had faced a health crisis last year, I'd been the one to move in temporarily to help with her young family. Porter, I called as he reached the door. I'm not saying no. I'm just asking for time to think about it. He paused, hand on the doorknob, not turning around. The opportunity won't wait, Mom. But hey, it's your money. If you'd rather let it sit in accounts earning nothing while inflation eats it away, that's your choice. I'm trying to build something here, for all of us. After he left, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the loan papers. The amount he wanted to borrow was nearly 2/3 of my entire retirement savings. The collateral, my house, was the only real security I had. Later that afternoon, I called Susan, my oldest friend. We'd met in nursing school 45 years ago and had seen each other through marriages, children, grandchildren, and in her case, divorce. He just showed up with the papers already drawn up, no discussion beforehand. Susan's disbelief came clearly through the phone. He's mentioned needing investors before, but never anything about me putting up my house as collateral. And what does Angie say about all this? Susan asked, referring to Porter's second wife. I don't know. She wasn't with him. The thought troubled me. Angie was practical and level-headed. Would she have approved of this? Loretta, remember what happened with my brother Don? He put everything into that restaurant venture of his son's. And now he's living in that tiny apartment and working part-time at 73. I did remember. Don had gone from a comfortable retirement to greeting shoppers at a big box store within 2 years after his son's business collapsed under debt. Porter, wouldn't let that happen, I said. But even to my own ears, my voice lacked conviction. Maybe not intentionally, Susan replied gently. But business is risky, especially these days. And if he's this desperate for money, he's not desperate, I said automatically. He just sees an opportunity. An opportunity that requires his retired mother to put her house on the line. Have you looked at his credit score lately? Or called Leah to see what she thinks? I hadn't, and the realization bothered me. Porter and Leah had always had a complicated relationship. She was cautious like Tom, while Porter was always chasing the next big thing. They loved each other, but they rarely agreed, especially about money. I'll think about it, I said. After we hung up, I walked through my house, touching the familiar walls, looking at the photos that charted the journey of our family. There was Porter on his first bicycle, Leah in her graduation gown, Tom in his favorite fishing spot, the grandchildren at the beach last summer. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine losing it all, the house, the savings, everything Tom and I had worked for. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I remembered Porter's expression when I'd hesitated to sign. Not disappointment, not concern, anger, entitlement. My phone buzzed with a text. Porter. Sorry about this morning. Stressed about the deal. Dinner tomorrow to talk it through? I'll bring the papers again. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Can't tomorrow. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. Then I did something I'd never done before. I opened my computer and logged into my bank accounts to see exactly what I had and what I stood to lose. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Leah. Mom, are you okay? Porter called me last night, saying you were acting strange and might be getting confused about your finances. My hand tightened around the phone. What exactly did he say? Leah hesitated. He said you couldn't remember. Discussions you'd had about investing in his business. He's worried you might be... Well, he mentioned early dementia. Mom, you know Grandma started showing signs around your age. A chill ran through me. My mother had indeed developed Alzheimer's in her late 60s, but this was different. This was calculation. Leah, your brother asked me to put up my house as collateral for a loan yesterday. For the first time. There were no previous discussions. Silence hung between us. Then, that's not what he told me. I imagine it isn't, I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. Do you need me to come over? I can drop the kids at school and be there by 10. No, honey, I'm fine. just disturbed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the photo of Tom on my nightstand. "What would you do?" I whispered, to his smiling face. Tom had always been Porter's greatest defender. When our son's first business failed, Tom had said, "He needs to learn, Loretta. Better to fail young." When Porter's marriage to his high school sweetheart crumbled under the weight of his 60-hour work weeks, Tom had reassured me. He's finding his way. But Tom had also been shrewd with our money. "Never risk what you can't afford to lose," he'd say. And now Porter was asking me to risk everything. My laptop still sat on the kitchen table from the night before. I opened it again and logged into my accounts. My nest egg wasn't enormous, but it was enough. $487,000 in retirement accounts, the house worth about $320,000 with no mortgage, and a small life insurance payout from Tom that I'd kept in a separate account for emergencies. My hands hovered over the keyboard. On impulse, I typed "signs of financial elder abuse" into the search bar. What came back made my stomach knot. Unexplained financial transactions, abrupt changes to wills or financial documents, family members expressing excessive interest in assets, using tactics like isolation or allegations of mental incapacity. I closed the browser quickly, as if someone might see over my shoulder. This was Porter, my son, not some predator. And yet, I decided to drive to his office. Not to confront him, just to see for myself how his business was doing. Porter's company, Meridian Construction, had always operated out of the same small office park on the north side of town. He'd been proud of staying lean, often criticizing competitors who spent too much on fancy offices. As I pulled into the parking lot, something felt off. The Meridian Construction sign was gone from the directory. I parked and walked to where his office should have been, only to find the door locked, the windows covered with paper from the inside. A neighboring tenant stepped out of her office. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm looking for Meridian Construction." "Oh, they moved out about 3 weeks ago," she replied. "Middle of the night type of thing. Left some furniture behind, too." My heart pounded. "Did they leave a forwarding address?" She shook her head. "Sorry. The property manager might know." I thanked her and walked slowly back to my car, mind racing. Porter hadn't mentioned moving his office. Not during our weekly Sunday dinners. Not during his impromptu visit yesterday. Why would he hide something so basic? I called his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Next, I tried the Meridian office number. "We're sorry. The number you have reached is no longer in service." Fighting rising panic, I drove to Porter and Angie's house. It was a sprawling Tudor in one of the newer developments. Too much house for just the two of them, I'd always thought. But Porter had insisted they needed it for entertaining clients. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed their second car was gone, and the normally immaculate lawn needed mowing. Angie answered the door in workout clothes, surprise evident on her face. "Loretta, is everything okay?" "I was just in the neighborhood," I lied. "Thought I'd stop by." Her smile seemed strained as she invited me in. The house was oddly bare. Several pieces of furniture missing, blank squares on the walls where artwork had hung. "Are you redecorating?" I asked casually. "Something like that," Angie replied, not meeting my eyes. "Can I get you some tea?" In the kitchen, more signs of change. Empty spots where appliances had been, half-empty cabinets visible through partially open doors. "Angie," I said quietly, "what's going on?" "I went by Porter's office today. It's empty." Her hands froze in the act of filling the kettle. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then her shoulders slumped. "He didn't want anyone to know yet. We're restructuring." The business is moving to a home office model to cut costs. She set the kettle down without turning it on. It's temporary. And the furniture? The artwork? Angie sank into a chair. We sold some things. The economy's been tough on construction. Porter came to me yesterday asking for a loan against my house. He said it was for a big opportunity, not because he was in trouble. Something flickered in Angie's eyes. Fear? Resignation? She stood abruptly. I should call Porter. He'll want to explain everything himself. Please don't, I said, reaching for her hand. Not yet. Tell me the truth, Angie. How bad is it? She looked toward the doorway as if expecting Porter to appear, then back at me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Bad. The IRS has placed liens. Suppliers are threatening lawsuits. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. Why didn't he tell me? Pride, shame. Take your pick. Angie's laugh held no humor. He kept saying he could fix it, just needed one big contract to turn things around. She hesitated. Did you sign anything for him yesterday? No. I asked for time to think. Relief washed over her face. Good. That's good. She squeezed my hand. Don't tell him I told you, please. He'd never forgive me. As I drove home, my thoughts churned like storm clouds. The son who'd slammed his fist on my table, demanding my retirement savings, wasn't just being opportunistic. He was drowning. And he'd been willing to pull me under with him rather than admit the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time. I closed my eyes. I saw Porter's face, transforming from the little boy who'd climbed into my lap after nightmares to the desperate man who'd tried to manipulate me out of my security. By morning, I knew I needed to do more than just refuse his request. I needed to protect myself from my own son. After a restless night, I called in a favor from Don Murray, an old friend of Tom's who worked as a financial advisor. We'd kept in touch after Tom's passing, meeting occasionally for coffee and reminiscing about the fishing trips our husbands had taken together. Can we meet today? I asked, not wanting to explain over the phone. It's important. Don agreed to see me during his lunch break. His office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. This is about Porter, I said once we were seated in his private office. Don's expression turned cautious. He and Tom had always disagreed about Porter's business ventures. What's he done now? I explained everything. The loan request, the covered-up business troubles, Porter's attempt to manipulate Leah by suggesting I was becoming mentally incompetent. With each detail, Don's face grew more concerned. I need to know how bad this really is, I finished. Can you look into his business? Discreetly? Don leaned back in his chair. Loretta, I'm not a private investigator. But you have access to financial databases, credit reports. Tom always said you could find out anything about anyone's money situation. He sighed heavily. I shouldn't do this. Please, Don, I'm afraid. Those 3 words, so difficult to say aloud, changed his expression. Give me a couple of days. In the meantime, don't sign anything. And Loretta, don't tell Porter you've spoken to me. The next morning, Porter called again. His voice was honey-sweet, all traces of anger gone. Mom, I'm sorry about the other day. I came on too strong. It's fine, Porter. How about I come over tonight, just to talk? No paperwork, I promise. I want to explain everything clearly. I agreed, knowing I needed to maintain normalcy until I had more information. After we hung up, I drove to the county courthouse. If there were legal actions against Porter or his company, there would be records. The clerk was a young woman with kind eyes who helped me navigate the public record system. What I found made my heart sink. 3 lawsuits filed against Meridian. Construction in the past year for breach of contract and non-payment. A tax lien from the state. And most disturbing of all, A judgment from 4 months ago ordering Porter to pay a former employee $178,000 for injuries sustained on a job site. Injuries that weren't covered because Porter had let the workers' compensation insurance lapse. "Is there a way to check if there are any loans or liens against my property?" I asked the clerk. She showed me how to search property records using my address. To my relief, nothing unauthorized appeared. But how long would that last if Porter grew more desperate? My next stop was the bank where Tom and I had done business for 30 years. Martha, the manager, had come up through the ranks with us as clients. She welcomed me warmly, though her smile faded as I explained my concerns. "I need to know if anyone has tried to access my accounts," I said, "or if there have been any inquiries about loans using my home as collateral." Martha's expression turned professional. "Let me check. We take unauthorized access very seriously." 10 minutes later, she returned with a printout. "There was an online attempt to access your joint accounts 2 days ago. The system flagged it because the password was incorrect after multiple attempts." 2 days ago? That was the day Porter came to my house. Martha continued, her voice carefully neutral. "There was also a phone inquiry last week about the requirements for a home equity line of credit on your property. The caller identified himself as your son, saying he was helping you arrange it." My hands began to shake. "I never authorized that." "I know. That's why nothing proceeded." Martha placed her hand over mine. "Loretta, I don't want to overstep, but given what you're telling me, I think we should review your account security measures." By the time I left the bank, I had new passwords, additional authentication requirements, and a freeze on any new credit applications in my name. It wasn't enough to completely protect me, but it was a start. Porter arrived at my house that evening with takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant and a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers. The charm offensive was in full swing. "You look tired, Mom," he said as he set the table. "Are you sleeping okay?" "I'm fine, just busy." I watched him arrange the food, noticing the expensive watch on his wrist. A new purchase despite the financial troubles Angie had described. Over dinner, Porter painted a rosy picture of his business prospects. The Westlake contract was just the beginning, he assured me. Once that was secured, other opportunities would follow. He needed capital now, but the return would be tremendous. "I'd make you a partner, Mom. You wouldn't just be lending me money, you'd be investing in our family's future." I nodded, asking questions that seemed supportive while revealing nothing of what I'd learned. When he mentioned a potential investor meeting next week, I asked, "Will you be holding that at your new office location?" Porter's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "How did you know we moved?" "Angie mentioned it when we spoke." I lied smoothly. He relaxed. "Yes, we've downsized temporarily. Smart business move in this economy." "And how is Angie?" She seemed a bit stressed when I saw her. His eyes narrowed slightly. "When did you see Angie?" "I stopped by yesterday to drop off that casserole dish she lent me." Another lie, but necessary. She didn't mention it. Porter studied me for a moment, then smiled. "She's fine. Just busy with her volunteer work." The volunteer work Angie had been passionate about, fundraising for the Children's Hospital, had been a point of pride for her. I doubted she had time for it now, with their world collapsing around them. As Porter helped clear the dishes, his phone rang. He checked the screen and his expression darkened. "I need to take this. Business call." He stepped onto the back porch, closing the door behind him, but I could still hear the tension in his voice through the window. "I told you I'm handling it." "Yes, by next week." "No, that's not acceptable." When he came back inside, the charming mask had slipped. He looked older suddenly, the lines around his mouth deeper. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Fine. Just supplier issues." He glanced at his watch. "I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow." At the door, he hugged me tightly, almost desperately. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, My son was in trouble, drowning in problems of his own making. Then I remembered the false allegations of dementia, the attempted account access, the manipulation. Think about what I said, Mom, he urged. This opportunity won't wait forever. After he left, I sat in the quiet house, Porter's desperation and deception swirling in my mind. Tomorrow, Don would have more information for me. But in my heart, I already knew the truth. My son was not just asking for help. He was reaching for a lifeline, willing to pull me under to save himself. Don called me early the next morning, his voice tense. Loretta, can you come to my office today? I found something you need to see. An hour later, I sat across from him, watching as he spread documents across his desk. Bank statements, credit reports, business filings, court records. More than I'd been able to access on my own. It's worse than you thought, Don said gently. Meridian Construction is essentially bankrupt. Porter hasn't filed corporate taxes in 2 years. He's been using new project deposits to finish old jobs. A classic construction Ponzi scheme. I stared at the papers, trying to process what I was seeing. But he always had work. Clients seemed happy. On the surface, maybe. But look at this. Don slid over a credit report. Porter's personal credit score is 440. That's catastrophic. He's maxed out 7 credit cards. Missed his mortgage payment 4 times in the past year. There's a repossession notice on his truck. My stomach churned. The Westlake contract he mentioned doesn't exist, Don confirmed. I called a contact at Westlake Development. They rejected Meridian's bid 3 months ago due to financial instability concerns. I felt like I couldn't breathe. So everything he told me was a lie. Everything, Don agreed solemnly. But there's more, Loretta, and it's difficult. He handed me a folder containing printouts of emails. They were from Porter to someone named Marcus Blackwell at Sunbelt Financial. The subject line read, Private Loan Collateral Documentation. I scanned the messages, my vision blurring as I read Porter's words. My mother will sign over her house as collateral. She trusts me completely. Once the paperwork is done, we can access the full amount. No need to worry about her understanding the terms. I handle all her financial decisions since my father died. Worst case, if the business can't make the payments, the house is worth well over the loan amount. We can sell it, and I'll move her into a senior apartment. The last email was dated just 1 week ago. Had to delay. Mom being difficult. Give me another week to convince her. If necessary, I have documentation of her recent confusion episodes that could help us move forward without her direct approval. My hands went numb. The folder slipped from my fingers, papers spilling across the floor. Don quickly gathered them up, giving me a moment to compose myself. I'm sorry, Loretta. I debated whether to show you these, but you needed to know the full picture. How did you get these emails? My voice sounded distant, as if someone else were speaking. My nephew works in IT security. He owed me a favor. Don had the grace to look slightly ashamed. It's not strictly ethical, but given the circumstances. I nodded, beyond caring about the methods. The evidence was clear. My son had been planning to defraud me of everything. There's one more thing, Don said hesitantly. This Marcus Blackwell and Sunbelt Financial. They're not legitimate lenders. They operate in the gray market, lending to desperate people at extortionate rates, often with enforcement methods that wouldn't pass legal scrutiny. Loan sharks, I whispered. Essentially, yes. If Porter had succeeded in using your house as collateral and then defaulted— Don didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I sat in silence, feeling the weight of this betrayal crushing me. Porter, my firstborn. The little boy who'd drawn me Mother's Day cards with crooked hearts. The teenager who'd helped Tom fix the roof without being asked. The man who'd held my hand at Tom's funeral and promised to always take care of me. What should I do? I finally asked. Don leaned forward. First, you need to secure your assets immediately. Today, I've prepared some options. He handed me another folder. Second, you should consider consulting an attorney about a restraining order. Financial abuse of the elderly is— I'm not— Elderly, I interrupted sharply. Don smiled sadly. In legal terms, anyone over 65 can be considered vulnerable to this type of exploitation. The law offers specific protections. As Don outlined the steps I should take, a cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my survival, financial and otherwise. Porter had shown himself willing to declare me incompetent, to conspire with shady lenders, to take everything I had worked for. I left Don's office with a detailed action plan and the email evidence securely saved to a USB drive. Instead of going straight home, I drove to the cemetery where Tom was buried. I hadn't visited in months. It had been too painful. But today, I needed his presence, even if only symbolically. The autumn air was crisp as I stood before his headstone, tears streaming down my face. He was going to take everything, Tom, I whispered. Our son. The boy you were so proud of. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves around me. I remembered something Tom had said near the end, when Porter had asked for money to expand his business. Love him enough to let him fail while the stakes are still low. We hadn't followed that advice. We'd cushioned every fall, enabled every risk, shielded him from the consequences of his choices. And now the stakes couldn't be higher. On the drive home, my phone rang continuously, Porter calling again and again. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened to his messages, his tone progressed from cheerful to concerned to irritated. Mom, just checking in. Mom, are you okay? Call me back. Mom, this is ridiculous. I need an answer about that loan by tomorrow. The last message chilled me. Look, I've been patient, but time's running out. I've already got the paperwork drawn up with your information. All you need to do is sign. I'll be over tomorrow morning. At 9. Be there. The threat was implicit but clear. My son was desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked across the street. The driver seemed to be watching my house. When he saw me looking, he quickly drove away. Inside, I double-checked that all doors and windows were locked. Then I sat at my kitchen table and opened the folder Don had given me. The first page read, Asset Protection Plan for Loretta. My hands didn't shake as I picked up the phone to make the first call. Fear had given way to something stronger. Resolve. Son had underestimated me. He thought I was just a trusting old woman he could manipulate and discard. He was about to learn how wrong he was. That night, sleep was impossible. I moved through my darkened house like a ghost, touching familiar objects, remembering the life Tom and I had built. In the study, I found myself opening the cedar chest where I kept our most precious mementos. Porter's baby book lay on top. I hesitated before opening it, knowing the emotions it would unleash. There he was, my beautiful baby boy, his tiny hand, wrapped around my finger in the hospital, his first haircut, wisps of fine blonde hair taped to the page, the crayon drawing he'd made in kindergarten, stick figures labeled Mom, Dad, and me, standing in front of a lopsided house with a giant sun overhead. When had that loving child transformed into someone who could coldly plan my financial ruin? Had there been signs I'd missed? Early warnings I'd dismissed? I remembered Porter at 16, taking Tom's car without permission and returning it with a dented fender. He'd looked us straight in the eyes and claimed another driver had hid it in the school parking lot. We'd believed him until the neighbor mentioned seeing him back into a fire hydrant. Then there was the money that disappeared from my purse when Porter was in college. Money he swore he hadn't taken, until we found the receipts from the bars. He'd visited that weekend, small lies, small thefts. We'd called them youthful mistakes. phases he would outgrow. We'd believed in his potential so strongly that we'd rationalized away the red flags, making excuses for inexcusable behavior. And I was still doing it. Even now, part of me wanted to believe that Porter was just desperate, not malicious, that he would have repaid the loan if his business had succeeded, that he wouldn't really have sent me to some budget senior home if I'd lost my house. In the kitchen, I made tea and watched the sunrise slowly illuminate the backyard. The old maple tree Tom had refused to cut down. "It was here before us, Loretta, and it'll be here after," glowed golden in the early light. Porter had climbed that tree as a boy, building elaborate forts in its branches. Leah had been too cautious for such adventures, preferring to read in its shade instead. Leah. I needed to talk to her, not just about Porter's schemes, but about my own culpability in creating this situation. Had my parenting contributed to Porter's sense of entitlement? Had my willingness to repeatedly bail him out taught him that he could always use me as a safety net? The thought of Leah brought me to my grandchildren, her children, Alex and Mia. They adored their Uncle Porter, who always brought them extravagant gifts and took them for ice cream. How would they feel when they learned what he had done? What would this rift do to our family? My chest tightened. The pain of betrayal was giving way to something deeper and more complex. Grief. I was grieving the son I thought I had, the relationship I'd believed in, the future family gatherings that would now be fractured by mistrust. Around 8 o'clock, I called Leah. "Can you come over? Alone?" My voice must have conveyed the urgency, because she agreed immediately. While waiting for her, I pulled out the photo albums from the years after Tom's death. There was Porter, arm around my shoulders at the memorial service. Porter helping to sort through Tom's workshop, carefully organizing the tools his father had cherished. Porter taking me to dinner on my first birthday as a widow. Had it all been calculated? I couldn't bear to think so. Yet the evidence Dawn had uncovered suggested a long pattern of deception. Leah arrived just after 9, her face pinched with worry. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you sick?" "Not sick, just facing some difficult truths." I led her to the living room, where I'd laid out the documents from Dawn, the credit reports, the lawsuits, the damning emails. As Leah read through them, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to horror. "He was going to declare you mentally incompetent? His own mother?" Her hands shook as she set down the papers. "I can't believe this. I knew Porter had money troubles, but this— You knew?" A small, irrational part of me felt betrayed all over again. Leah looked miserable. "Not the extent of it. He borrowed money from me, too, said it was for a business expansion. When I asked about repayment last month, he got defensive, said I should be more supportive like Dad would have been. The same manipulation tactics. The same invocation of Tom's memory. How much did he take from you?" $20,000. My entire emergency fund. Leah's voice was barely audible. "I didn't tell you because I was embarrassed, and Porter swore he'd pay it back before the kids' tuition was due." We sat in silence, mother and daughter united in our sense of betrayal. Finally, Leah asked the question I'd been asking myself all night. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to protect myself, and you should too." I squeezed her hand. "But first, I need to know, is this my fault? Did I make Porter this way by always rescuing him, by never holding him accountable?" Leah's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, no. We all make our own choices. You and Dad gave us the same upbringing, the same values, the same opportunities. I chose one path, Porter chose another. But we enabled him, every time. Out of love, Leah insisted. You acted out of love. Porter's actions are about something else entirely." As she helped me make a fresh pot of tea, Leah asked quietly, "Are you going to call the police?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Report my own son? Have him arrested? I don't know, I admitted. Right now, I just need to make sure he can't access my accounts or pressure me into signing anything. You need to act fast, Leah warned. Porter called me last night, asking if I'd talk to you about the loan. He sounded not like himself. When I suggested he look for other investors, he snapped at me. Said I'd always been the favorite and now I was trying to turn you against him. Paranoia. Desperation. These were dangerous combinations. The image of that unfamiliar car watching my house flashed through my mind. After Leah left, promising to return the next day, I stood in my bedroom, looking at the wedding photo of Tom and me on the dresser. We looked so young, so filled with hope for the future. A future that had included raising children who would carry our values into the world. Tom had been the gentle one, always seeing the best in people, especially in Porter. I'd been the practical one, the one who worried, who planned, who tried to anticipate problems before they arose. Now I needed to be both. Compassionate enough to understand that my son was in a desperate place, but practical enough to protect myself from the harm he was willing to inflict. I opened my closet and pulled out the suitcase from the top shelf. Whatever I decided to do next, I needed to be prepared to move quickly. Porter was coming tomorrow morning at 9, expecting me to sign away my future. He would discover that his mother was not the easy target he'd imagined. Porter arrived at 8:30 the next morning, half an hour earlier than he'd said. I was already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. I'd been up since 5, making phone calls, sending emails, putting my plan into motion. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and steeled myself. I could do this. I had to. Porter stood on the porch with a leather portfolio under his arm and a box of my favorite pastries in hand. His smile faltered slightly when he saw my expression. "Morning, Mom. Thought I'd come early so we could have breakfast together before going through the paperwork." He held up the pastry box like a peace offering. I stepped back to let him in, noticing how his eyes darted around the house, taking inventory. Would he be evaluating what he could sell? What he could liquidate once he had control? "Coffee?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Sure." Porter set the portfolio on the table and followed me into the kitchen. "You okay, Mom? You seem a little off." "Just tired. Didn't sleep well." He nodded sympathetically. "Probably nervous about the paperwork. Don't worry. I've made it as simple as possible. Just a few signatures and we're done." The casual way he discussed having me sign away my home, as if it were nothing more consequential than ordering takeout, made something snap inside me. "Before we get to that," I said, pouring his coffee, "I wanted to ask you about Sunbelt Financial and Marcus Blackwell." The coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "How do you, and while we're at it, maybe you could explain why you told Leah I was showing signs of dementia. Or why you tried to access my bank accounts without permission." Porter set the cup down with a clatter, coffee sloshing over the rim. For a moment, shock rendered his face almost unrecognizable. Then his expression hardened. "Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? The point is, I know what you've been planning." He recovered quickly, his tone shifting to wounded innocence. "Planning? Mom, I don't know what you think is happening, but I'm just trying to secure funding for a business opportunity, one that would benefit both of us. By putting my house at risk with loan sharks? By declaring me mentally incompetent if I refuse to cooperate?" Porter's eyes narrowed. "Who showed you my emails? That's an invasion of privacy." "My privacy was invaded when you tried to access my accounts." I held his gaze steadily. "And when you plotted to take my home, take your—" Porter laughed, but it sounded forced. "Mom, you're being dramatic. Yes, I've explored some non-traditional funding options. Yes, I discussed using your house as collateral, but it was always with the understanding that I'd make the payments. You wouldn't have lost anything. Except my financial security. My independence. My home." I shook my head. The business is bankrupt, Porter. There's a lien from the IRS, multiple lawsuits. You have no way to make those payments. His face flushed with anger. You've been spying on me? Going through my personal financial information? I was protecting myself. Porter stood suddenly, knocking his chair backward. From what? From your son trying to save his business? From the person who's been looking out for you since Dad died? Looking out for me? By lying? By manipulating Leah into thinking I'm losing? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. By conspiring with predatory lenders who would take my house if, when, you defaulted? It wouldn't have come to that. Porter slammed his hand on the counter. The sound made me flinch, but I held my ground. I just need capital to get through this rough patch. Once the business rebounds, there is no business anymore, Porter. I went to your office. It's empty. Angie told me the truth. At the mention of his wife, Porter's expression turned dangerous. You talked to Angie? Behind my back? She's worried about you. We all are. She had no right to discuss our finances with you. He was pacing now, like a caged animal. This is exactly why I didn't tell you about the business troubles. You panic, you overreact, you start interfering. I took a deep breath. Porter, I'm not signing those loan documents. Not today, not ever. He froze, staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and rage. Then he gave a short, bitter laugh. Fine, don't sign. I'll just get power of attorney. 1. Call to Dr. Reynolds about your episodes of confusion and... Dr. Reynolds is already aware of the situation. My interruption stopped him mid-sentence. I spoke with him yesterday. He's documented our conversation and my clear mental competency in my medical record. Porter's face went slack with shock. Then he lunged for the portfolio on the table, yanking out a stack of papers. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? Well, it doesn't matter. I've already got your signature on these preliminary forms. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I haven't signed anything. He held up a document with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. Remember that birthday card you signed for Mia last month? The lease renewal for the vacation cabin last year? Did you even read what you were signing? Horror washed over me as I realized what he'd done. Collected my signature from other documents to forge my approval on these loan forms. That's fraud, Porter. It's survival, he shouted, his composure completely gone now. Do you have any idea what I'm facing? The people I owe money to aren't the type who accept excuses. The veiled reference to Marcus Blackwell and his shady lending operation sent a chill down my spine. How deep was Porter in with these people? Give me those papers. I held out my hand, trying to keep it from trembling. No. Porter clutched them tighter. This is happening, Mom. One way or another. I took a step back, suddenly aware of the physical difference between us. Porter was over 6 feet tall, still fit from years of construction work. I was 5'4" and 68 years old. If you submit forged documents, I'll report it to the police, I said as calmly as I could. Something flashed in Porter's eyes. A look so cold and calculating that for a moment I didn't recognize my own son. You wouldn't do that to me. Your own son. Try me. We stood in a silent standoff, the air thick with tension. Then Porter's phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen, his face paling. I have to take this. He stepped into the living room, speaking in low, urgent tones. I couldn't make out the words, but his body language told me everything I needed to know. Hunched shoulders, placating, hand gestures, rising panic in his voice. When he returned to the kitchen, some of the fight had gone out of him, replaced by barely concealed fear. I need this money, Mom. Today. These people, they're not patient. For a brief moment, I saw my son clearly, not as the manipulator who'd been plotting against me, but as a frightened man drowning in consequences of his own making. A part of me still wanted to rescue him, to throw him a lifeline one more time. But I knew with sudden clarity that saving him now would only postpone the inevitable and destroy me in the process. I can't help you, Porter. Not this way. His expression hardened again. Then you leave me no choice. As he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, I felt a mixture of grief and resolve wash over me. The pastries he'd brought sat untouched on the counter, a reminder of how easily he'd thought he could buy my compliance. I waited until his car disappeared down the street before picking up the phone to make the most difficult call of my life, Soon as Porter's car disappeared from view, I called Leah. He was here, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. It was worse than I expected. He's forged my signature on documents. I'm coming over, Leah replied without hesitation. Have you called the police? Not yet. I need to think this through. While waiting for Leah, I called Don Murray. His secretary put me through immediately. Don, Porter just left. He tried to use the loan documents, and when I refused, he showed me papers with my signature already on them. Forgeries. Don's intake of breath was audible. Loretta, this has crossed into criminal territory. You need to file a police report. No. But he's my son. A son who's willing to commit fraud against his own mother. Don's voice was gentle but firm. Think about what happens if those forged documents make it to Sunbelt Financial. You could lose everything. He was right. With those papers, Porter could potentially move forward with the loan, putting my house at risk. But reporting my own child to the police, the thought was almost unbearable. I'll come with you to the station if you want, Don offered. Let me talk to Leah first. She's on her way over. After hanging up, I went to my study and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a manila envelope containing my will, insurance policies, and a sealed letter Tom had written to me before he died. A letter I was supposed to open if I ever faced a crisis he couldn't help me through. I'd never opened it. It had felt too final, too much like accepting he was truly gone. But now, I broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Tom's familiar handwriting filled the page. My dearest Loretta, if you're reading this, you're facing something difficult alone. I wish I could be there to help you through it. Since I can't, here's what I know for sure. You are stronger than you think. You always have been. Throughout our life together, I watched you face challenges with a quiet courage that amazed me. Sometimes I think you believed I was the strong one, but we both know that isn't true. You were our family's backbone. Whatever you're facing now, trust your instincts. They've never led you astray. And remember that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You can't help others if you're drowning. I love you more than I could ever express. Whatever decision you make, I support you completely. Forever, yours. Tom tears blurred my vision as I folded the letter and held it to my chest. Even now, years after his death, Tom knew exactly what I needed to hear. Leah arrived 20 minutes later, her face tight with worry. Mom, are you okay? Did Porter threaten you? Not physically. I led her to the kitchen and showed her the forged documents Porter had left behind in his haste. But these are a different kind of threat. Leah examined the papers, her expression darkening. This is Dad's signature too, from before he died. She pointed to a witness line at the bottom of one form. Porter must have been planning this for months. The realization that Porter's scheme predated even our confrontation sent a wave of nausea through me. How long had my son been plotting against me? We need to go to the police, Leah said firmly. This isn't just about money anymore. Porter needs help, and he's not going to get it if everyone keeps protecting him from consequences. Her words echoed Tom's letter so closely that it felt like a sign. You sound like your father. Good. Dad never tolerated dishonesty, even from us kids. Leah squeezed my hand. Remember when Porter stole money from the church fundraiser in high school? Dad made him return it in person and work extra shifts at the shelter to make amends. I did remember. Tom had been strict about honesty and accountability, especially with Porter, who had always been drawn to shortcuts. Had I undermined those lessons after Tom's death by becoming too permissive, too willing to rescue? There's something else, I said quietly. Dawn found evidence that Porter has been considering having me declared incompetent, claiming I have dementia like my mother did. Leah's face paled. I don't even have words. I've spoken with Dr. Reynolds. He's documented my mental clarity in my medical records and is prepared to testify if needed. But the fact that Porter would even consider this route, it means he's desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. Leah's voice was resolute. Mom, I know this is painful, but we need to protect you legally. I nodded slowly. There's one more person I need to talk to first. 20 minutes later, Angie sat across from us at my kitchen table, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I should have told you everything sooner, she said, clutching the tissue I'd given her. But Porter kept saying he could fix it, that he just needed a little more time, a little more money. Start from the beginning, I urged gently. When did the business troubles start? Angie took a shaky breath. About 2 years ago, Porter took on a big commercial project but underbid to get the contract. Then material costs spiked. He started moving money around to cover the shortfalls, taking deposits for new jobs to finish old ones. Robbing Peter to pay Paul, Leah murmured. Exactly. Then he missed a tax payment, which led to penalties, which led to missing more payments. Angie twisted the tissue in her hands. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. We've sold almost everything of value. Last month, he took out a loan from some private lender with terrible terms. Marcus Blackwell? I asked. Angie's eyes widened. You know about him? I know enough to be concerned. What kind of man is he? A look of genuine fear crossed Angie's face. The kind who sends people to check in if you miss a payment. The kind who inspects collateral in person. Porter owes him $50,000 due next week. And he has no way to pay, I guessed. None. That's why... Angie couldn't finish the sentence. That's why he needed my house as collateral for a bigger loan, I completed for her. To pay off Blackwell. Angie nodded miserably. I told him it was wrong. I begged him to come clean with you, to ask for help straightforwardly. But he said you'd never understand, that you'd just lecture him about responsibility like his father used to. The irony was bitter. If Porter had been honest, I might have helped him in some way. Not by risking my house, but perhaps with a smaller loan, or by connecting him with legitimate financial advisors. His deception had foreclosed those possibilities. Has Porter ever been... I hesitated, not wanting to ask, but needing to know. Has he ever been physically intimidating with you? When he's upset or desperate? Angie's gaze dropped to the table. He's never hit me. But lately, when things get bad, he throws things, punches walls. Last week he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises when I suggested selling his car. You need to stay somewhere safe until this is resolved, Leah said firmly. Both of you do, she added, looking at me. Angie's shoulders slumped in defeat. I've been staying with my sister since yesterday, after Porter found out I'd spoken to you. She didn't finish the thought. As the three of us sat there, mother, daughter, daughter-in-law, united in our concern and heartbreak, I finally accepted what I needed to do. My son had crossed lines that could not be uncrossed. His actions had put multiple people at risk, including himself. Protecting him from consequences wouldn't help him anymore. It would only enable his continued descent. I'm going to file a police report about the forgery, I announced, my voice steadier than I expected. And then I'm going to move my assets where Porter can't access them, ever. Both women nodded, their expressions reflecting my own painful resolve. "It's the right thing to do, Mom," Leah said softly. "I know," I replied. "I just never imagined it would come to this." Filing a police report against my own son was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Detective Sandra Morris took my statement. In a small room at the police station, her expression professionally neutral as I explained Porter's actions. The forgery, the attempts to access my accounts, the plan to have me declared incompetent. "Do you have the forged documents with you?" she asked. I handed over the portfolio Porter had left behind. "These are copies. He has the originals." She examined them carefully. "And you're certain you didn't sign these?" "Absolutely certain." The question stung, though I understood why she needed to ask. My signature was taken from other documents, birthday cards, lease agreements. Detective Morris nodded. "We'll need handwriting analysis to confirm, but this appears to be a clear case of attempted fraud." She looked up from her notes. "Mrs. Miller, I have to ask, are you sure you want to pursue this? These charges could result in serious consequences for your son." "I understand." My voice wavered slightly. "But yes, I'm sure." After taking my formal statement, she explained the next steps. An investigation would be opened, Porter would be interviewed, and the district attorney would decide whether to file charges based on the evidence. "In the meantime," she advised, "secure your finances and consider a restraining order. Based on what you've told me about Mr. Blackwell, your son is under significant pressure. That can lead to unpredictable behavior." By the time I left the station, I felt emotionally drained but strangely lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Not the burden of Porter's actions, but the burden of pretending they weren't happening. Leah was waiting in the parking lot to drive me home. "How did it go?" "As well as could be expected." I gazed out the window as we pulled away from the station. "I never thought I'd be filing fraud charges against my own child." "You're doing what you have to do," Leah reassured me. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." When we arrived home, there was an unfamiliar black SUV parked in my driveway. A tall man in an expensive suit stood on my porch, and beside him was Porter, his face contorted with rage. "Mom!" he shouted as we pulled up. "What the hell did you do?" Leah tensed beside me. "Should we leave? Call the police?" I took a deep breath. "No, this is my home. I won't be driven away from it." As we got out of the car, I saw the man in the suit more clearly. Early 50s, silver-haired with the cold eyes of a predator. I knew instinctively this was Marcus Blackwell. "Mrs. Miller," he said smoothly as I approached. "Your son and I were just discussing an unexpected development with our loan agreement." "There is no loan agreement," I replied firmly. "And there won't be one." Porter stepped toward me, his face flushed. "You went to the police? Your own son? You forged my signature and tried to steal my house," I replied, keeping my voice level. "What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to help me." Porter's voice cracked with desperation. "Like you've always done. Like family is supposed to do." Blackwell placed a restraining hand on Porter's arm. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside, away from prying eyes." "No." I stood my ground. "Whatever you have to say can be said right here." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Miller, I understand your concerns, but your son has made certain commitments that involve your property. Commitments that carry obligations. Any commitments Porter made regarding my house were fraudulent." I met Blackwell's cold gaze directly. "And I've already filed a police report documenting that fact." Something dangerous flickered across his face. "Police involvement complicates matters unnecessarily." "I disagree. I think it clarifies things perfectly." I turned to Porter. "The police are investigating the forgery. Whatever scheme you two cooked up is over." Porter's expression shifted from anger to panic. "Mom, you don't understand. I owe Mr. Blackwell $50,000, due next week. That's your problem, not mine." "But I don't have it." Porter's voice rose hysterically. These people, they don't just send collection notices. They break legs. They take collateral by force if necessary. Blackwell's smile tightened. Your son exaggerates. We simply protect our investments through various means. Is that a threat? Leah stepped forward, phone in hand. Because it sounds like one, and I'm recording this conversation. Blackwell's demeanor changed instantly. Not at all, just explaining business realities. He turned to me with calculated reasonableness. Mrs. Miller, surely we can find a solution that works for everyone. Perhaps a smaller loan, secured by just a portion of your equity. There will be no loan. I looked at Porter. And if you or any of your associates come near my property again, I'll add harassment and intimidation to the police report. Mom, please. Porter's anger had given way to naked fear. You don't know what these people will do to me if I can't pay. For a moment, maternal instinct almost overwhelmed my resolve. This was my son, terrified and in danger. But then I remembered the forged documents, the attempts to declare me incompetent, the willingness to send me to a senior apartment while he liquidated my home. You should have thought of that before borrowing money you couldn't repay and trying to use my house as collateral without my consent. Porter turned to Blackwell, desperation etched on his face. I just need more time. 1 more week. Time costs money, Blackwell replied coldly. And my patience has limits. He handed Porter a business card. Call me when you have a realistic solution. Until then, the clock is ticking. With a last, assessing look at me, he walked to his SUV and drove away. The moment he was gone, Porter rounded on me. Do you have any idea what you've done? These aren't people you mess with? Neither am I. My voice was steel. You crossed a line, Porter. Multiple lines. I was desperate. I still am. He raked his hands through his hair. They're going to hurt me, Mom, maybe worse. Then go to the police yourself. Tell them everything about Blackwell's operation. Get protection. Porter laughed bitterly. Right. And add jail time for loan fraud to my problems? It might be safer than the alternative. Leah stepped between us. Porter, Mom's right. These people are dangerous. The police can help. The police can't do anything until something actually happens, Porter snarled. And by then it might be too late. He turned back to me, his expression shifting to the manipulative charm I was beginning to recognize all too well. Mom, I know I messed up. I know I betrayed your trust. But please, if you ever loved me, help me one last time. Just enough to pay off Blackwell. After that, I swear I'll never ask for another penny. It was the same promise he'd made after his divorce, after his first business failure, after the tax lien. Always one last rescue, one final chance that somehow became another and another. No, Porter, not this time. His face hardened. Fine. Then whatever happens is on your conscience. And whatever you did to create this situation is on yours. I replied steadily. As Porter stormed to his car, Leah put her arm around my shoulders. You did the right thing, Mom. Did I? I watched my son drive away, wondering if I'd ever see him again, and if I did, what state he would be in. He could be in real danger. He put himself in danger, Leah reminded me gently. And he was willing to put you in danger too. Inside the house, I sank onto the sofa, emotionally exhausted. The confrontation with Porter and Blackwell had confirmed what I'd suspected. The situation was even more dangerous than I'd thought. Blackwell wasn't just a shady lender. He was a genuine threat. And now that threat had my address. You can't stay here tonight, Leah said, reading my thoughts. It's not safe. I nodded, too drained to argue. I'll pack a bag. As I moved through my bedroom gathering essentials, my phone rang. It was Angie. Loretta. I just got a text from Porter, she said, her voice shaking. "He says you went to the police and now everything is ruined." "What happened?" I explained the confrontation with Blackwell while continuing to pack. "Oh my God," Angie whispered. "Blackwell came to your house?" "Loretta, you need to be careful. Porter told me stories about what this man has done to people who cross him. I'm leaving now, staying with Leah for a while." "Good." Angie paused. "There's something else you should know. Porter emptied our joint savings account yesterday, the little we had left. I think he might be planning to run." The news didn't surprise me, but it did confirm my decision. If Porter was willing to abandon his wife along with his responsibilities, my misplaced loyalty would help no one. "Take care of yourself, Angie," I said softly. "And let me know if you hear from him again." After hanging up, I finished packing quickly, taking only what I needed: clothes, medications, important documents, and Tom's letter, which I tucked into my purse. As I zipped the suitcase closed, I glanced around the bedroom one last time, wondering when or if I would sleep here again. The home Tom and I had built together no longer felt safe. My son had seen to that. That night, in the guest bedroom of Leah's suburban home, sleep eluded me. The events of the day played on repeat in my mind: Porter's desperation, Blackwell's veiled threats, the police report that might send my son to prison. Had I made the right choices? Was there another path I had failed to see? Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and padded quietly downstairs. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of a clock in the living room. I made a cup of chamomile tea and settled into the window seat overlooking Leah's backyard. The moon cast silver light across the children's swing set and the small vegetable garden Tom had helped Leah plant 2 summers before he died. Tom, what would he have done in my position? The letter in my purse had offered support, but not specific guidance for this impossible situation. I found myself remembering a day nearly 30 years ago. Porter, then 17, had taken Tom's car without permission and gotten into a minor accident. When confronted, he'd lied, claiming another driver had hit the car in a parking lot. Tom had known immediately it wasn't true. "Why are you lying to us, son?" he'd asked quietly. Porter had hung his head, mumbling about being afraid of punishment. Tom's response had stayed with me all these years. The consequence for the accident would have been losing driving privileges for a month. The consequence for lying about it is losing them for 6 months, and our trust, which is far more valuable. Tom had always been clear about the importance of accountability. He'd believed that rescuing our children from the natural consequences of their actions would cripple them in the long run. Had I abandoned that principle after his death, allowing Porter to avoid consequences again and again until he believed himself entitled to whatever he wanted, regardless of who it hurt? As I sipped my tea, I noticed a framed photograph on the side table, Tom holding baby Mia, his first grandchild. His face was alight with joy, the same expression he'd had when Porter and Leah were born. He had loved his children fiercely, but that love had never blinded him to their flaws or prevented him from setting boundaries. "What would you do now, Tom?" I whispered to the photograph. "When the stakes are so much higher than a dented car or a teenage lie?" In the stillness, I felt a certainty form within me, not Tom's voice, but my own inner knowing, shaped by our years together and the values we'd shared. Porter had chosen his path, step by deliberate step. Each lie, each manipulation, each attempt to exploit my trust had been a conscious decision. The desperate situation he now faced with Blackwell was the culmination of those choices, a consequence he had earned through his own actions. My enabling had not protected him. It had only delayed the inevitable reckoning while allowing the potential damage to grow exponentially. If I rescued him now by giving him my retirement savings, what would he learn? Only that manipulation, forgery, and threats were effective, tools to get what he wanted. And what would happen the next time he needed money? What desperate measures would he take when my resources were depleted? The clock in the living room chimed 3 times as another realization crystallized. Porter's sense of entitlement to my money mirrored a deeper belief that my purpose as his mother was to serve his needs, regardless of the cost to me. In his worldview, my financial security, my home, my very autonomy were less important than his desires. When had this distortion taken root? Had I contributed to it with my reflexive rescues, my willingness to put his needs above my own? Or was it simply the character he had developed despite our parenting? Either way, one thing was clear. Continuing to sacrifice myself on the altar of Porter's poor choices would help neither of us. He needed to face reality, the reality of his actions and their consequences, if he was ever to change. And I needed to protect myself, not just my finances, but my dignity and agency, if I was to have any kind of secure future. As dawn began, to lighten the sky, I took Tom's letter from my purse and read it again. You can't help others if you're drowning. The words resonated with new clarity. My retirement savings weren't just numbers in an account. They represented my independence, my ability to care for myself through aging and potential illness, my capacity to help Leah and her children when appropriate, to contribute to causes I believed in, to live with dignity. Porter wasn't asking for help. He was demanding my sacrifice. And his willingness to use forgery, manipulation, and threats to achieve that goal revealed exactly how little he valued me beyond what I could give him. Grief washed over me anew, not just for the son I thought I had, but for the mother I had been. A mother who had tried so hard to help that she had forgotten the most important lesson. True help empowers. It doesn't enable. Around 6, Leah found me still sitting by the window. She sat beside me without speaking, placing her hand gently over mine. I've been thinking all night, I finally said. About Porter, about your father's approach to parenting, about what real love looks like. Leah nodded, waiting. Your father believed that loving someone means wanting what's best for their character, not just what eases their immediate pain. I squeezed her hand. I lost sight of that after he died. I wanted to fix everything for Porter, make his life easier. But in doing so, I might have made it harder for him to develop the strength and integrity he needs. It's not your fault, Mom, Leah said softly. Porter makes his own choices. Yes, he does, and now I need to make mine. I straightened my shoulders, feeling a resolve that had been building through the night solidify into certainty. I'm not just going to refuse to give Porter money. I'm going to make sure he can never access my accounts, even if something happens to me. What are you thinking? I'm going to transfer everything, my retirement accounts, my savings, the eventual proceeds from selling my house, into a protected trust. One that Porter can't touch, no matter what. The decision once made brought a profound sense of peace. This wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about reclaiming my agency, my right to determine how the fruits of my life's work would be used. Will you help me? I asked Leah. Of course, she replied. Whatever you need. I'll need a good estate attorney, and we should probably talk to Dawn about the financial aspects. As we began to make plans over breakfast, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Your son owes me money. He says you have it. You have 48 hours to pay his debt, or things will get unpleasant. This is your only warning. MBI showed the message to Leah, whose face paled. We need to call Detective Morris, she said. Right now. I nodded, my resolve unshaken despite the threat. Blackwell was dangerous, yes, but I would not be intimidated into sacrificing my future. Make the call, I said. And then let's find that attorney. It's time to make sure my money goes exactly where I want it to go, and nowhere else. Detective Morris arrived at Leah's house within an hour of our call, her face grave as she examined the threatening text message. This gives us grounds to investigate Blackwell, she said. making notes in her small book. Threatening communications are taken very seriously, especially when connected to lending activities. Will that be enough to stop him? I asked. Not immediately. Men like Blackwell operate in gray areas, legitimate enough on paper to avoid immediate arrest, but using intimidation tactics that are harder to prove in court. She looked up from her notes. In the meantime, I strongly advise you to stay away from your home until we've made progress on this case. After the detective left, promising increased patrols near my house and Leah's, we called Don Murray. He arrived by mid-morning, bringing with him another man, Daniel Winters, an estate attorney he trusted. The four of us gathered around Leah's dining room table, surrounded by financial statements, property records, and legal pads. Based on what you've told me, Daniel said after reviewing my situation, we need to act quickly and comprehensively. Your son has already demonstrated his willingness to forge documents and potentially declare you incompetent. We need to create legal barriers that will be difficult for him to circumvent. What do you suggest? I asked. A three-pronged approach. Daniel ticked off points on his fingers. First, an irrevocable trust for your major assets. Once established, even you won't be able to easily modify it, which means Porter definitely can't. Second, updated powers of attorney for healthcare and finances, explicitly excluding Porter. Third, a revised will that clearly outlines your intentions. Don nodded in agreement. From the financial side, I recommend liquidating some investments and moving funds to new accounts at different institutions, places where Porter has no history or connection. How quickly can we do all this? I asked. The trust will take a few days to set up properly, Daniel replied, but we can get started immediately with the power of attorney documents and begin the process of transferring accounts. What about my house? The thought of never returning to the home I'd shared with Tom sent a pang through my heart, but I knew it might be necessary. Don exchanged glances with Daniel. Honestly, Loretta, given Blackwell's threats and Porter's desperation, selling might be the safest option, not just financially but physically. He's right, Leah added gently. As long as you own that house, Porter knows exactly where to find you, and so does Blackwell. The reality of the situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. I wasn't just restructuring my finances. I was dismantling the life I'd built and starting over somewhere new, somewhere safe from my own son. Where would I go? I wondered aloud. You could stay with me permanently, Leah offered immediately. Or, Don suggested, this might be the time to consider that retirement community in Arizona you and Tom used to talk about. Close to your sister, good security, plenty of activities. Tom and I had indeed talked about Desert Palms, a beautiful community near Phoenix where my younger sister Susan had moved 5 years earlier. We'd even put our names on the waiting list, though we'd never gotten serious about it after Tom's diagnosis. They probably have a years-long waiting list by now, I said. Let me make a call, Don offered. I have a client who's on their board. While Don stepped outside to make his call, Daniel and I began drawing up lists. Assets to transfer, accounts to close, people to notify. Each item represented another tie to my old life that would need to be severed or transformed. Leah worked alongside us, offering suggestions and emotional support. When I hesitated over what to do with some of Tom's belongings still at the house, she gently said, "We can store everything at my place until you're settled. Nothing has to be decided right now." By early afternoon, we had the outline of a comprehensive plan. Create an irrevocable trust with Leah as trustee and her children as beneficiaries after my death. Execute new power of attorney documents naming Leah and my sister Susan. Open new accounts at financial institutions where Porter had no relationships. Transfer all liquid assets to these new accounts. List my house for sale with a trusted realtor who understood the sensitive circumstances. Find temporary housing until a permanent solution was secured. Update my will to explicitly exclude Porter with clear documentation of the reasons, as Daniel began drafting the power of attorney documents, Don returned from his call, looking pleased. "You're in luck. Desert Palms has a 2-bedroom villa available next month. A resident had to move to assisted living unexpectedly. Given your history with them and my client's recommendation, they're willing to hold it for you if you can provide a deposit by the end of the week." For the first time in days, a spark of hope fluttered in my chest. Desert Palms had been our dream, a place for an active retirement, surrounded by like-minded people, with Susan nearby for family connection. It had security gates, a feature that now seemed essential rather than just convenient. "That's perfect timing," I said, making a quick decision. "Let's secure it. There's one more thing to consider," Daniel said, looking up from his laptop. "Porter may escalate when he realizes what you're doing. The process of creating the trust and selling the house will generate paperwork he might discover." Leah frowned. "Is there any way to keep it quiet until everything is finalized?" "Not entirely, but we can move quickly and be strategic." Daniel thought for a moment. "We should prioritize securing the liquid assets first. That's the easiest for Porter to access through forgery or manipulation. The house sale can follow." As we continued refining the plan, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Angie's number. "Loretta," she said breathlessly when I answered. "Porter came home this morning, packed a bag, and left again. He was frantic, saying something about having to get out of town for a while." My heart sank. "Did he say where he was going?" "No, but he took his passport. And—" She hesitated. "He asked if I had any jewelry we could sell. When I said no, he got angry, started searching through my things. He found my grandmother's ring, the only valuable I have left, and took it." Anger flared within me. "Angie, you need to report this to the police." "I already did. That's actually why I'm calling. The officer mentioned that you'd filed a report yesterday about Porter forging documents. He said they're looking into the connection between the two cases. After we hung up, I relayed the conversation to the others." "This changes things," Don said grimly. "If Porter's planning to flee, he might make one last desperate attempt to access your money before he goes. Or," Daniel suggested, "he might attempt to use those forged documents immediately, hoping to get funds before you can stop him." The urgency of our situation suddenly intensified. What had been a methodical planning session transformed into a race against time. "We need to freeze everything now," I decided. "Today? Can we do that?" Don nodded, already reaching for his phone. "I can place temporary holds on your major accounts with a few calls. It won't be as thorough as the trust, but it will create immediate roadblocks. And I'll file emergency power of attorney paperwork this afternoon," Daniel added. "Given the BDI police reports and the documented threats, we can request expedited processing." As they made their calls, I sat quietly, absorbing the reality that my son was now a fugitive, running from Blackwell, from the police, from the consequences of his own actions. The pain was acute, but alongside it was something unexpected. Clarity. For years I'd been trying to save Porter from himself. Now I needed to save myself from Porter. Leah placed her hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Mom?" I covered her hand with mine and nodded. "I will be. For the first time in a long while, I know exactly what I need to do." By late afternoon, the initial safeguards were in place. My main accounts were frozen to new transactions, emergency powers of attorney had been filed, and the deposit for the Desert Palms villa was being processed. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a start, a foundation upon which I could rebuild a secure, independent life. A life free from manipulation, free from fear, and most painfully but necessarily, free from Porter's destructive influence. This next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. With Don and Daniel's guidance, I systematically dismantled my old financial life and constructed a new one, fortified against Porter's interference. First came the bank accounts. With powers of attorney in hand, Leah and I visited 3 different financial institutions, closing my existing accounts and opening new ones with enhanced security features, verbal passwords, security questions. Porter wouldn't know the answers. 2. And restrictions on telephone and online access. "Are you sure you want to close this account, Mrs. Miller?" asked the manager at my longtime bank. "You've been with us for over 40 years. "I'm sure," I replied, signing the final paperwork. Sometimes a fresh start is necessary. Next came the retirement accounts, the very funds Porter had been so desperate to access. Dawn facilitated the transfers, moving everything to a new brokerage firm and initiating the paperwork for the irrevocable trust. "Once this trust is established," Daniel explained as I signed the documents, "these assets will be protected not just from Porter, but from any potential claims or manipulations. They can only be used for your benefit during your lifetime, and, after that, they'll go to the beneficiaries you've designated." "And Porter cannot be added later?" I confirmed. "Not without extraordinary legal proceedings. The whole point of an irrevocable trust is that it cannot be easily changed, even by you." The finality of that decision weighed heavily on me. I was not just protecting my assets from Porter's current schemes. I was permanently removing him from my financial legacy. Yet each signature felt like an act of self-preservation, necessary, deliberate, empowering. With my liquid assets secured, we turned to the house. A realtor friend of Dawn's, Sandra, came to assess the property, bringing with her a security specialist who installed temporary cameras and motion sensors. "Given the circumstances," Sandra said, "I recommend we list quickly but quietly. No open houses, only private showings with pre-qualified buyers, and I'll be present for everyone." "How quickly do you think it will sell?" I asked. "In this market, with your location?" "Probably within 2 weeks. We'll price it to move, but you'll still do very well." That evening, Leah and I returned to my house with 2 off-duty police officers Dawn had arranged to hire as security. We needed to pack my essential belongings and retrieve important documents, family heirlooms, and personal items that couldn't be replaced. Standing in my bedroom, surrounded by the life Tom and I had built together, the enormity of what I was doing finally hit me. I wasn't just protecting my finances. I was saying goodbye to the home where we'd raised our children, where we'd grown old together, where I'd spent the last years of Tom's life caring for him. "Mom?" Leah stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" I nodded, wiping away tears. "Just remembering. Your father loved this house." "He loved you more," Leah said gently. "He would understand why you're doing this. He would want you to be safe." We worked methodically, room by room. Photographs came down from walls. Tom's favorite books were carefully packed. My jewelry, not particularly valuable, but sentimentally priceless, went into a special case. The family silver, passed down from my grandmother, was wrapped and boxed. In Tom's study, I found the small fireproof safe where we kept our most important documents. Inside, along with birth certificates and insurance policies, was a small velvet pouch I had forgotten about. It contained my mother's wedding ring, a simple gold band with tiny diamonds that had skipped Porter and gone directly to Leah when my mother died. "I'd forgotten about this," I said, showing it to Leah. "Your grandmother wanted you to have it. I remember when she gave it to you for safekeeping." Leah smiled sadly. Porter was so angry that she hadn't left it to him for his first wife. Another sign, had I been willing to see it, Porter's sense of entitlement had been evident even then. As midnight approached, the house was eerily empty of personal touches. Furniture remained for staging purposes, but anything that made it distinctly mine had been packed into boxes and loaded into the moving truck Dawn had arranged. Standing in the doorway. One last time, I ran my hand along the wall where we had marked the children's heights as they grew. Porter's last mark was at 17, nearly 6 feet tall, already looking down at his father with that confident smile that had always made me so proud. Where had that boy gone? At what point had pride turned to arrogance, confidence to entitlement, ambition to ruthlessness? "Ready, Mom?" Leah asked softly. I took a deep breath, letting the memories wash over me one last time. Then I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. As we drove away, I didn't look back. The house faded into darkness behind us, but ahead, a new path was taking shape. Uncertain, yes, but mine to choose, mine to walk, mine to define. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of worry lifting from my shoulders. Whatever happened, next, I had taken back control of my life. 2 weeks later, I stood in the entryway of my new villa at Desert Palms, surrounded by boxes and the unfamiliar echo of empty rooms. The morning sun streamed through east-facing windows, illuminating terracotta tiles and freshly painted cream walls. "What do you think?" Susan asked, her arm linked through mine. My sister had driven 3 hours from her home in Tucson to help me settle in. "It's beautiful," I said, taking in the high ceilings and the view of distant mountains through the sliding glass doors. Different, but beautiful. Everything had happened with dizzying speed. My house had sold in just 10 days, above asking price, with a clean offer and quick closing. The irrevocable trust had been established, my assets transferred, and new bank accounts set up with security measures that even I sometimes found cumbersome. But most importantly, I had disappeared from Porter's radar. My phone number had been changed, my address unlisted, my social media accounts deactivated. As far as he knew, I was still in hiding at Leah's house, not starting a new life 2 states away. "You've got good bones to work with here," Susan said, walking through the living room. "We'll get you settled in no time." The villa was smaller than my old house, but perfectly sized for one person: 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open kitchen and living area, and a small enclosed patio garden. The community offered security, amenities, and most importantly, anonymity. As we unpacked kitchen items, Susan asked the question I'd been dreading. "Have you heard anything about Porter?" I shook my head. "The police are still looking for him. Apparently, he used Angie's credit card to buy a plane ticket to Mexico, but they don't know if he actually went there or if it was a misdirection." "And Blackwell?" "Detective Morris called yesterday. They're building a case against him for predatory lending practices and intimidation. But these investigations take time." Susan nodded, carefully unwrapping my mother's china. "Are you scared?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But mostly I'm sad. Grieving, I suppose. For the son I thought I had, for the relationship I'd hoped for as I grew older." "You still have Leah," Susan reminded me gently. "And me, and the grandkids." "I know. I'm grateful for that." I managed a small smile. "And for this fresh start, even if it wasn't how I imagined retirement would be." We continued unpacking, transforming the empty villa into something that felt, if not quite like home, at least like a sanctuary. Susan hung a few familiar paintings. I arranged Tom's books on new shelves. By evening, the kitchen was functional and the bedroom set up with fresh linens. After a simple dinner of takeout eaten on the patio, Susan brought out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "To new beginnings," she toasted. "And to letting go," I added, as we sipped our wine, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Susan said, "You know, I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately." Our mother, widowed at 52, had faced her own difficult transitions. What about her? Remember how devastated she was when Dad died? How we all thought she'd never recover? I nodded. Our father's sudden heart attack had shattered our mother's world. For months afterward, she had barely functioned, lost in grief and uncertainty. But then, Susan continued, she rebuilt her life, went back to school, made new friends, traveled. Those last 20 years of her life were different than what she'd planned, but they were rich and meaningful. I remembered the transformation, how, Our quiet, dependent mother had gradually discovered her own strength, her own voice. By the time Alzheimer's claimed her in her 70s, she had lived a second life that was entirely her own creation. "You're a lot like her, you know," Susan said. "Stronger than you realize." The comparison touched me deeply. I had always admired our mother's resilience, but had never seen myself as possessing the same quality. Yet here I was, starting over, at 68, rebuilding my life after betrayal and loss. That night, alone in my new bedroom, I unpacked the small box of personal treasures I'd kept with me rather than sending with the movers. Tom's watch, our wedding album, the letter he'd written me, and a small framed photo of Porter and Leah as children, their arms around each other, grinning at the camera. I traced Porter's young face with my finger, remembering the sweet, eager-to-please child he had once been. That child was gone now, transformed by choices and circumstances into someone unrecognizable to me. The grief of that loss was profound, a wound that might never fully heal. Yet alongside the grief was something unexpected, a quiet determination to create meaning from this painful chapter. I had protected myself financially, yes, but the harder work lay ahead, building a life that honored both what I had lost and what I might still discover. I placed the childhood photo in the bedside drawer rather than on display. Perhaps someday I would be ready to look at it without pain. For now, it was enough to know it was there, preserving a memory of happier times while allowing me to focus on the present. As I drifted toward sleep in the unfamiliar bedroom, I realized that the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for weeks had loosened. I was safe here. My future was secure. And tomorrow would bring new possibilities I couldn't yet imagine. For the first time since discovering Porter's betrayal, I slept deeply and without dreams. 3 months passed quickly at Desert Palms. What had begun as a refuge gradually transformed into a home, and with that transformation came changes in me as well. It started small, joining the community book club, attending a watercolor class offered in the activities center, taking morning walks with a group of residents who gathered at sunrise. Each step outside my comfort zone became a little easier than the last. "You're blooming here," Susan observed during one of her weekly visits. We were having coffee on my patio, which I had filled with potted succulents and desert flowers, my first garden that wasn't planned around Tom's preferences. I wouldn't go that far, I demurred, though secretly I felt it too. The heavy grief that had accompanied my move was slowly lightening, making space for new experiences, new relationships, new aspects of myself. The financial restructuring that Dawn and Daniel had helped me implement was now complete. My assets were secured in the irrevocable trust, my house sold, and my day-to-day finances simplified and protected. The relief of knowing that Porter could no longer access my resources, even if he somehow found me, had freed mental and emotional energy I hadn't realized was being drained. Detective Morris called periodically with updates. Porter had indeed fled to Mexico, but had apparently moved on from there, his trail growing colder with each passing week. Blackwell's predatory lending operation was under investigation by federals. Authorities, with several victims coming forward to share similar stories of exploitation and threats. They'll likely catch up with both of them eventually, Morris told me during our last call. These types of cases take time, but they usually end with arrests, especially with the interstate and international elements. I thanked her for the update, but found, somewhat to my surprise, that the urgency I'd once felt about Porter's whereabouts and legal consequences had diminished. My focus had shifted from the past I couldn't change to the future I was actively creating. That future included reconnecting with old interests and discovering new ones. In my second month at Desert Palms, I joined the finance committee, putting to use the accounting skills I'd developed during my career, but had set aside during Tom's illness and the years after his death. "You have quite a head for numbers," remarked Parker, the committee chair and a retired financial analyst, We could use your perspective on the annual budget review. The committee work led to dinners with Parker and his wife Leah, a coincidence of names that made me smile, which led to introductions to their friends, which led to a gradually expanding social circle. For the first time in years, I was building relationships that were solely my own, not extensions of Tom's connections or obligations to family. I spoke with Leah, my daughter, not Parker's wife, several times a week. She and the children had visited once, with plans for longer stays during school breaks. To my relief, she supported my new independence, never pressuring me to return home or making me feel guilty for embracing this unexpected chapter. "You seem happier, Mom," she observed during one video call. "More like yourself." "I'm not sure who myself is anymore," I replied honestly. "I'm discovering that day by day." Perhaps the most surprising development was my growing interest in financial literacy education. It had begun almost accidentally when I helped a neighbor understand her retirement account statements, then evolved into informal coffee gatherings, where women in the community brought financial questions they were too embarrassed to ask elsewhere. "You explain these things in a way that makes sense," one woman told me after I'd helped her decode the terms of her late husband's life insurance policy, "without making me feel stupid for not knowing already." Those words resonated deeply. I thought of how Porter had deliberately kept me in the dark about his business dealings, how he'd counted on my trust and financial deference. How many other women of my generation had been conditioned to leave financial matters to the men in their lives, only to find themselves vulnerable when circumstances changed. The idea that had been germinating took clearer shape. A formal workshop, series for women at Desert Palms, focused on financial independence and protection against exploitation. With Parker's encouragement, I drafted a proposal for the activities director, who embraced it enthusiastically. "Financial self-defense for seniors," she read from my proposal. "I love the framing. When can you start?" Planning the workshop series gave me purpose and focus. I researched, organized materials, and practiced presentations in front of Susan, who offered constructive feedback and encouragement. The process was both challenging and energizing, pushing me to develop skills I'd never fully utilized. 6. Weeks after submitting my proposal, I stood before a room of 30 women and 3 brave men for the first workshop session. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged my notes on the podium, but when I looked up at the expectant faces, something shifted inside me. These were people who needed what I had to offer, not just information, but understanding born from experience. My journey through Porter's betrayal and financial manipulation, painful as it had given me insights that could help others protect themselves. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "Today we're going to talk about how to maintain control of your financial future, regardless of what life throws your way." As I spoke, sharing both professional knowledge and personal wisdom, I felt a sense of alignment I hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. This new role, this new community, this new version of myself felt authentically mine in a way that being Porter's mother or even Tom's wife never quite had. I hadn't just survived Porter's attempt to take my retirement savings. I had emerged stronger, more self-aware, and more committed to helping others avoid similar exploitation. It wasn't the retirement I had planned. It was in many ways better. 6 months into my new life at Desert Palms, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, a habit I'd developed since Porter's betrayal. But I was expecting to hear from a potential speaker for my financial literacy workshop. "Hello? Mrs. Miller? This is Detective Morris." My hand tightened around the phone. "Detective, has something happened?" "Yes, ma'am. I thought you should hear it from me directly." "We've located your son." The world seemed to slow around me. I sank onto the nearest chair. Is he all right?" "He's alive, yes. He was arrested in Costa Rica 3 days ago, attempting to use a fraudulent passport. The local authorities contacted us because of the international warrant we'd placed. My mind raced with conflicting emotions: relief that Porter was alive, anxiety about what would happen next, a deep sadness that his life had come to this point. "What happens now?" I asked. "He's being extradited back to the United States. He'll face charges here for the fraud against you, as well as additional charges for fleeing prosecution and various financial crimes the investigation has uncovered." I closed my eyes, absorbing the news. After months of uncertainty, Porter had been found. The legal process I'd set in motion would now play out to its conclusion. "There's something else you should know," Morris continued after a moment. "We've also arrested Marcus Blackwell. The investigation into his lending operation led to evidence of money laundering, racketeering, and loan sharking across 3 states. Your case helped break open a much larger criminal enterprise." After ending the call, I sat motionless for a long time, staring at the desert landscape outside my window. The mountains in the distance remained steadfast, unchanged by the turmoil of human lives. There was comfort in their permanence, their indifference to my small dramas. That evening, I called Leah to share the news. "How do you feel about it, Mom?" she asked after a long silence. "I don't know," I admitted, relieved that he's safe, sad that it's come to this, worried about what will happen to him in the legal system. "Do you want to come back for the hearings? You could stay with us." The question gave me pause. Did I want to return? To face Porter in a courtroom? To revisit the pain and betrayal? "I don't think so," I said finally. My presence won't change the legal outcome, and seeing him in those circumstances would only bring more pain to both of us. The next morning, I was drinking coffee on my patio when my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID displayed County Jail. My heart pounded as I answered. "You have a collect call from an inmate at County Correctional Facility. The name provided is Porter Miller. To accept this call, press 1. My finger hovered over the keypad. After all this time, after everything that had happened, Porter was reaching out. Part of me wanted to reject the call, to maintain the protective distance I'd established. But another part, the mother who had loved him for 47 years before his betrayal, couldn't turn away. I pressed 1. "Mom?" Porter's voice sounded thin, subdued. "Is that really you?" "It's me." I kept my tone neutral, guarded. "They told me you moved, that you sold the house and disappeared." A pause. "I've been trying to find you." "That was the point, Porter. To make sure you couldn't find me." His breath caught audibly. "I know I messed up, badly, but you have to understand, I was desperate. Blackwell was threatening me. The business was collapsing." "Stop." I cut him off firmly. "I don't want to hear justifications. What you did was calculated and cruel. You were willing to steal my home, my security, my dignity." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the static of the connection. Finally, Porter spoke again, his voice smaller. "You're right. There's no excuse." Another pause. "The lawyer they assigned me says I'm looking at 5 to 7 years. Maybe more." The reality of those numbers, years of Porter's life spent in prison, hit me with unexpected force. Despite everything, this was still my son, the baby I had nursed, the boy I had raised. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said, meaning it. "Are you?" His tone sharpened briefly before softening again. "No, I guess you have every right not to be. I didn't think you'd really go through with pressing charges. You've always forgiven me before." There it was, the expectation that had defined our relationship for decades. Porter made mistakes. I cleaned them up. Porter took, I gave. Porter pushed boundaries, I forgave. This wasn't something I could forgive, Porter. You didn't just ask for money this time. You tried to take everything from me through deception and manipulation. You were willing to have me declared incompetent. I was desperate, he repeated, as if that explained everything. So was I replied, desperate to protect myself from my own son. We fell silent again, the weight of our broken relationship hanging between us. In the background, a voice announced that the call would end in 1 minute. I don't have anyone. Else? Porter said suddenly, an edge of panic in his voice. Angie's filed for divorce. My so-called friends have disappeared. Leah won't return my calls. You're all I have left. The naked plea in his voice tugged at my heart, but I steeled myself against the familiar pattern. How many times had Porter used my compassion, my maternal instinct, to draw me back into his manipulations? I can't be what you want me to be anymore. Porter, I said gently but firmly, I can't rescue you from this situation. You created it and now you have to face it. So that's it? Bitterness crept into his tone. 47 years as your son and you're just done with me? The question pierced me. Was I done with him? Could a mother ever truly be done with her child regardless of what they'd done? Don't know what the future holds, I answered honestly. But right now, I need to prioritize my own healing and security. I can't do that and be your safety net at the same time. The automated system announced the end of our call. Before the connection cut off, Porter said quickly, Wait, will you at least visit me? Just once. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me alone with the question and the decision it demanded. Porter's request to visit him lingered in my mind for days, coloring my thoughts during morning walks and keeping me awake at night. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to maintain the clean break I'd established. But another part recognized that this unresolved relationship would continue to haunt me until I faced it directly. After a week of deliberation, I called Leah. I think I need to see him, I said. Just once, to say what needs to be said in person. She was quiet for a moment. Are you sure, Mom? Porter has always known exactly how to manipulate you. I'm not the same person he manipulated before. Replied. These past months have changed me. 2 days later, I was on a plane back to my former hometown, anxiety and resolve battling within me. Leah met me at the airport, enfolding me in a tight hug. You look different, she said, studying my face. More certain, somehow. The observation surprised me. Do I? She nodded. It's in your eyes, your posture, like you finally know who you are. Her words stayed with me as we drove to her house, as I played with my grandchildren that evening, as I prepared for the prison visit scheduled for the following day. Did I know who I was now? The woman who had fled in fear and grief 6 months. Ego had indeed transformed, finding strength and purpose I hadn't known I possessed. The county jail was a stark, utilitarian building on the outskirts of town. As Leah and I approached the visitor's entrance, my steps slowed. You don't have to do this, Leah reminded me gently. I know. I squared my shoulders. But I need to. The visiting room was divided by a thick glass partition with phones for communication. When Porter was let in, I barely recognized him. His face was gaunt, his once confident posture diminished. When he saw me, a complex mix of emotions crossed his features. Hope, shame, relief, calculation. He picked up the phone on his side. I did the same. You came, he said, his voice wavering slightly. I wasn't sure you would. I needed to see you to finish this properly. Porter leaned forward, lowering his voice, though no one could hear him but me. Mom, listen. The DA is offering a plea deal, 3 years if I cooperate in the Blackwell case, but I need help with a good lawyer. The public defender is useless, not even a greeting, no asking how I was, just an immediate request for help. Porter, I said quietly, I'm not here to discuss legal strategies or financial assistance. His face fell. Then why did you come? To make sure you understand that things have changed permanently. I've created a new life, one where my resources are protected in an irrevocable trust that you can never access, even after I'm gone. Porter flinched as if I'd slapped him. You've disinherited me completely? Yes. The trust benefits Leah and her children exclusively. That's... He struggled to find words. That's extreme, don't you think? I made a mistake, a big one, I admit. But to cut me out entirely? It wasn't a mistake, Porter. It was a deliberate campaign to defraud me of everything I had. You were willing to have me declared mentally incompetent. You forged documents. You conspired with a loan shark. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I was desperate. So you've said, repeatedly, as if your desperation justified destroying my life. I wouldn't have actually let you end up with nothing, he protested weakly. Yes, you would have. My voice was steady, certain. If your plan had succeeded, I would have lost my home, my savings, and my dignity. You would have rationalized it then, just as you're trying to rationalize it now. Porter's expression hardened. So you came all this way just to tell me I'm cut off? To rub it in? No. I came to look you in the eye and tell you that I'm no longer available for manipulation. I came to release myself from the guilt and obligation that kept me tethered to your destructive patterns all these years. Wow. Porter laughed bitterly. Susan was right about you. The mention of my sister caught me off guard. What does Susan have to do with this? She always said you'd choose Leah over me eventually, that your perfect daughter would win in the eye. And the attempt to create division, to play on old family dynamics, was so transparent that I almost smiled. The old me might have been defensive, might have rushed to reassure him that I loved both my children equally. But I saw the tactic clearly now. This isn't about choosing Leah over you, Porter. It's about protecting myself from someone who tried to harm me. The fact that person is my son makes it more painful, not less wrong. He stared at me, seeming to truly see me for the first time. You've changed. Yes, I have. So there's really no chance? No way to fix this? I considered his question carefully. Was there a path to reconciliation? Could trust ever be rebuilt after such a profound betrayal? I don't know what the future holds, I said finally. But any relationship we might have going forward would need to be built on new terms. Terms that recognize and respect my autonomy and boundaries. And in the meantime, while I'm in here? In the meantime, I'm returning to the life I've built. I'm teaching financial literacy workshops. I'm making new friends. I'm discovering who I am beyond being your mother or Tom's wife. Porter's expression was unreadable. You're really not coming back, are you? No, I'm not. We sat in silence for a moment, the finality of that statement hanging between us. For what it's worth, Porter said eventually, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what I tried to do. I don't expect you to believe that, but it's true. I nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting his apology. I hope you use this time to reflect, Porter, to understand why you made the choices you did and how to make different ones in the future. The guard signaled that our time was ending. I stood, feeling strangely peaceful. Goodbye, Porter. He pressed his hand against the glass, a gesture both pleading and resigned. After a moment's hesitation, I briefly placed my palm against his, the cold barrier between us a physical manifestation of the boundaries I had established. Then I turned and walked away, not looking back. Outside in the bright sunshine, Leah waited, anxiously. How did it go? I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in months. It went exactly as it needed to, and it had. I had faced my son not as the accommodating, self-sacrificing mother he expected, but as a woman who valued herself enough to establish and maintain boundaries, even when those boundaries caused pain. The visit hadn't provided a neat resolution or a Hollywood reconciliation. What it had given me was something more valuable. the certainty that I could face my past without being controlled by it. As Leah and I walked to the car, she asked hesitantly, "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" "Perhaps someday," I replied. "But forgiveness doesn't mean restoration. It doesn't mean giving someone the opportunity to hurt you again." She nodded thoughtfully. "When do you fly back?" "Tomorrow morning. I have a workshop to prepare for." My new life was waiting, and for the first time I was eager to return to it, not as a refuge from pain, but as the authentic expression of who I had become. 1 year to the day after Porter first demanded my retirement savings. I stood at the podium in Desert Palms Community Center, facing a room of over 60 people, not just residents, but visitors from neighboring retirement communities and local seniors who had heard about our workshops. Financial independence isn't just about having enough money, I told them. It's about having the knowledge, the confidence, and the support system to protect what you've worked for. It's about recognizing that your financial security matters, that you have the right to maintain control over the resources you've spent. A lifetime building. The workshop series had grown beyond my expectations, evolving from casual information sessions into a structured program complete with guest speakers, printed resources, and even a monthly support group for those dealing with financial exploitation by family members. Many of us were raised to believe that family always comes first, I continued, that a parent's role is to sacrifice endlessly for their children. And there's truth in that, up to a point. But when sacrifice becomes exploitation, when giving becomes taking, we must be willing to establish boundaries. Faces in the audience nodded in recognition. Over the months, I'd heard dozens of stories similar to mine. Children demanding inheritance early, manipulating elderly parents out of their homes, using emotional blackmail to gain control of assets. The details varied, but the pattern remained. Consistent, vulnerability exploited by those who should have offered protection. After the workshop, a woman approached me tentatively. "I've been to all of your sessions," she said, "but I haven't been able to act on anything you've taught us." "What's holding you back?" I asked gently. "My daughter," she admitted. "She's been living off my retirement account for 3 years, always with promises to pay me back, to get a job soon. But she gets angry when I try to discuss it, accuses me of not loving her." Tears filled her eyes. "How did you find the strength to say no? To choose yourself?" It was a question I'd reflected on deeply over the past year. I realized that enabling my son's destructive behavior wasn't actually helping him, and I recognized that I deserved protection as much as anyone else. I squeezed her hand. "Start small, one boundary at a time. And remember, you're not alone in this." Later that evening, Susan joined me for dinner on my patio to celebrate the anniversary of what we now called my Liberation Day. The night was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of desert blooms. "To my brave big sister," Susan toasted, raising her glass. "Who taught me it's never too late to start over?" "I didn't feel brave at the time," I admitted. "Just desperate." Sometimes that's what courage looks like, doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. As we enjoyed our meal, I reflected on the journey of the past year. Porter had ultimately accepted the plea deal, receiving a 3-year sentence with possibility of parole after 18 months. I maintained minimal contact, occasional letters focused on his rehabilitation programs rather than my financial support. My relationship with Leah had deepened, freed from the shadow of Porter's demands and manipulations. She and the children visited regularly, with plans for an extended stay during the upcoming summer. My grandchildren now had their own bedroom in my villa, decorated with their artwork and favorite books. Professionally, I had found unexpected fulfillment. What had begun as informal financial advice had evolved into a second career of sorts. I was now writing a guide for senior women on financial self-protection, working with a local publisher who specialized in practical resources for older adults. Have you thought about what happens when Porter is released? Susan asked, bringing me back to the present. He'll be out in another year or so. I have, I nodded. The trust is secure, my boundaries are clear, and I've made peace with the limitations of our relationship. Whatever happens, I'm prepared. The truth was, I no longer feared Porter's return to my life. The hold he'd had over me, the guilt, the misplaced responsibility, the reflexive self-sacrifice, had been broken. I could now engage with him, if I chose to, from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. After Susan left, I sat alone in the moonlight, savoring the profound sense of peace that had gradually replaced the turmoil of the previous year. The path had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of grief, of wondering whether I had been too harsh or not firm enough. But through it all, I had discovered a fundamental truth. It is never too late to reclaim your life, to establish boundaries, to insist on respect. At 69, I had found a voice and a strength I hadn't known I possessed. My phone chimed with a text message from Leah. Just checking in. Love you, Mom. So proud of you. I smiled, typing back. Love you too. All is well here. And it was. The future stretched before me, not as an extension of past obligations, but as an open landscape of possibilities. I had financial security, meaningful work, loving relationships with those who respected my boundaries, and a community where I truly belonged. My son had demanded my retirement savings, seeing me as nothing more than a resource to be drained. In refusing him, I had discovered something invaluable, the woman I was always meant to be. As I prepared for bed that night, I paused at the mirror, studying my reflection. The face looking back at me was lined with age and experience, yes, but also a light with something that had been missing for too long. The quiet confidence of someone who knows her own worth and is no longer afraid to claim it. Well, Loretta, I whispered to my reflection, it seems you had one more adventure left in you after all, and something told me it was far from over. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.